The sun had barely risen over the quiet suburban streets, casting long shadows across neatly trimmed lawns and perfectly aligned mailboxes. It was the kind of neighborhood that prided itself on order, on rules, on a certain sense of perfection. Every house seemed to mirror the next, a carefully orchestrated harmony of color, garden, and symmetry. It was here, amid the manicured hedges and polite waves of neighbors, that a life had quietly unfolded, one that now left a void impossible to measure. The deceased, a figure known to many, loved by friends and family alike, had lived a life of simple kindness and quiet contributions. They were not a public celebrity, nor someone whose name would appear in newspapers, but in their small circle, they had been a cornerstone, a source of support, laughter, and community. From a young age, they had shown a remarkable sense of empathy, a tendency to help others without question, to offer comfort in times of pain, and to celebrate the joys of life with equal fervor. Neighbors remembered the way they would shovel snow for the elderly couple down the street, or how they always offered a warm smile and a cup of tea to anyone passing by. Children had flocked to their yard during summers, captivated by stories that seemed to leap from imagination to reality, tales of faraway lands, talking animals, and lessons in courage and kindness disguised in simple narrative. Family was at the center of their life. Every birthday, anniversary, and holiday was marked with thoughtful preparation, not for show, but out of genuine care for creating moments of happiness. Their home, a modest yet welcoming place, was a sanctuary for relatives and friends alike. There was always a place at the table, a spare chair, an open invitation, and a sense that anyone who entered could leave a little lighter, a little warmer, a little more at peace. The community had long been proud of this person, seeing in them a reflection of what neighborhood life could ideally be: connected, caring, and harmonious. They were a quiet leader in the HOA meetings, often advocating for fairness and reason, balancing the rules with humanity, encouraging neighbors to work together rather than merely enforce regulations. They understood the value of community, the importance of relationships, and the danger of letting rules become instruments of fear rather than tools of order. Yet even in this perfect neighborhood, there were those for whom rules were not simply guidelines, but weapons. And in the midst of grief and remembrance, these individuals could turn a moment of profound sorrow into a stage for absurdity. For years, the deceased had been at odds with a certain figure, known infamously as HOA Karen, a woman whose obsession with rules, fines, and the minutiae of neighborhood regulations had become legendary. While most residents feared her persistence, no one expected that her obsession would reach a level of audacity that even the laws of decency could scarcely imagine. This backdrop of everyday life, of warmth, respect, and quiet leadership, set the stage for the event that would shock an entire community. As family members arranged flowers, neighbors shared stories, and the cemetery prepared for the arrival of those paying their final respects, there was an unspoken understanding that today was sacred, a day meant for reflection, mourning, and closure. The deceased's life was to be honored, their memories celebrated, and their absence acknowledged with grace. Little did anyone know, the intrusion that would soon arrive would transform this sacred day into a moment of controversy, disbelief, and national attention. And then, like a shadow falling over sunlight, HOA Karen appeared, not with flowers, not with condolences, not with the quiet respect that a funeral demands, but with a clipboard, a list of alleged fines, and an unshakable conviction that rules mattered more than grief. She walked directly into the gathering, her steps measured, her voice prepared, her determination unwavering. The mourners froze, confusion and horror painting every face. Whispers spread like wildfire. Could this be happening? Was someone truly disrupting a burial because of HOA fines? The audacity was staggering. Excuse me, she began, her tone sharp, almost mechanical. Before this service continues, the deceased's outstanding HOA fines must be addressed. It is required by law and community standards that these dues be settled immediately. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Flowers swayed gently in the morning breeze. Birds chirped, unaware of the human tension below, and the family's grief hung thick in the air, suddenly interrupted by absurdity. Faces drained of color, some shook in disbelief, some pressed their hands to mouths, unable to comprehend the collision of mourning and obsession. The family stepped forward, trembling, trying to explain that this was neither the time nor the place, that the deceased could not answer, that dignity and respect for life must come before rules and fines. But HOA Karen remained unmoved. Her gaze was firm, her ledger held tightly as though it were a sacred text, her sense of authority absolute. Even neighbors who had encountered her before, who had witnessed petty disputes and relentless enforcement, felt a shiver of fear and disbelief at the scene unfolding before them. And so the moment stretched. A casket lay before a grieving congregation, a life being honored. And yet one person's obsession with control refused to yield. Some mourners quietly recorded the event on their phones, sensing the absurdity of it all. knowing that this story would inevitably reach far beyond the cemetery gates, stirring outrage, laughter, and disbelief in equal measure. Others silently consoled one another, holding hands, sharing whispered memories, and attempting to reclaim the dignity of the moment that had been invaded. Even amid this intrusion, the resilience of the human spirit shone through. Friends began recounting stories of the deceased's kindness, their voice shaking but determined. Tears mingled with laughter as memories were shared, the warmth of life remembered in spite of the absurdity surrounding them. And though HOA Karen's voice continued, demanding attention and compliance, the mourners refused to allow grief to be overshadowed completely. The event, as surreal as it was, quickly moved beyond the cemetery. Videos and photographs spread across social media, igniting debates about HOA authority, ethical boundaries, and the absurdity of prioritizing rules over humanity. Legal experts were consulted, neighbors weighed in, and the story became a cautionary tale about obsession, unchecked authority, and the importance of empathy. The cemetery air grew heavier as the sound of HOA Karen's voice cut through the quiet. Murmurs of grief. People shifted uneasily in their seats, some clutching tissues, others gripping hands of loved ones, all feeling the surreal intrusion on what was meant to be a solemn farewell. The casket rested at the center, draped in flowers, and around it, friends and family tried to focus on memories, on the stories of a life well lived, but every word, every phrase from the officiant seemed to struggle against the sharp, insistent tone that demanded attention. Your attention, please. HOA Karen's voice rang out again, sharper this time, almost authoritative, as if she were issuing a command rather than speaking to grieving strangers. Before we proceed, the matter of unpaid HOA fines must be addressed. This person owed dues. It is your responsibility as the family to ensure that these are settled. I cannot allow this ceremony to continue until this obligation is recognized. The family's matriarch, a woman whose hands were trembling from sorrow, stepped forward. Her voice quivered but carried, as she said, "This is not the time. My spouse or parent cannot respond. They are gone. This is a sacred moment for mourning, not for discussing financial matters." HOA Karen did not flinch. She adjusted her grip on the clipboard and leaned slightly forward, her gaze unwavering. Rules apply to everyone, regardless of circumstance. Death does not cancel obligations. The HOA has protocols, and I am simply enforcing them. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Some people gasped audibly, others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene. A neighbor whispered under his breath, "I've seen her fine people for leaving trash cans out a few hours too long. But this is insane." The deceased eldest child, a young adult with tears streaming down their face, stepped closer to the front. "You have no right to do this here," they said, their voice breaking but firm. "You are standing on sacred ground, surrounded by family and friends. How can you even think that this is acceptable?" HOA Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "I am doing what is required. Rules exist to maintain order. If debts are not paid, consequences follow. Even now, these fines cannot be ignored." It was then that the officiant, a kindly man in his 60s who had been guiding the service, spoke up with gentle authority. "This is a moment of respect. No financial obligation can interfere with honoring the dead. You may be enforcing rules, but here, today, humanity must come first." The tension was palpable. Birds flew from nearby trees, startled by the commotion, their wings flapping against the stillness. The flowers on the casket swayed with the motion of the crowd, shifting in disbelief. A young child, clutching a small stuffed animal, looked up at their mother and asked, "Why is she being so mean?" The mother hugged the child tightly, whispering, "Some people forget to be kind, even when it matters most." Several neighbors finally approached HOA Karen, hoping to reason with her, their voices a mix of urgency and frustration. "This is not the way," one said firmly. "This is a funeral. You have crossed every line imaginable." Another added, "There are rules, yes, but they do not extend into grief. Show some compassion." For a moment, it seemed as though reason might prevail. HOA Karen's expression softened just slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. But then she shook her head, muttering, "Protocols must be followed. I cannot allow exceptions." The officiant turned to the family and whispered, "We may need to continue the service despite her. Focus on each other. Focus on remembering." And so, with heavy hearts, the mourners began to reclaim the moment. Stories of the deceased were shared aloud, laughter mingled with tears. Memories painted in vibrant detail, voices rising above the intrusion. Friends recounted acts of kindness, moments of courage, times when the deceased had gone out of their way to help, to care, to make life better for others. HOA Karen stood for a while, her ledger in hand, observing the family's resilience, the community's solidarity, and perhaps realizing that some forms of authority simply cannot conquer grief. Slowly, she moved to the edge of the gathering, her voice fading into murmurs as others ignored her, determined to honor the life before them rather than the fines she so desperately clung to. Despite this, the day was forever marked by the confrontation. Videos and photos quickly appeared online, showing the surreal scene, grieving families, a casket surrounded by flowers, and one woman, unyielding, demanding attention over financial obligations. The internet erupted with disbelief, outrage, and even humor at the audacity of the event. Commenters debated HOA authority, ethics, and the line between responsibility and cruelty. Experts were consulted about whether an HOA could legally take such action, and most agreed that this behavior was not just ethically questionable, but legally absurd. The family, while shaken, found solace in each other. The service concluded with prayers and heartfelt farewells. And though the memory of HOA Karen's intrusion lingered, it could not erase the love, joy, and respect that had defined the deceased's life. Flowers were laid, hands were held, and hearts were allowed to grieve, remembering not the disruption, but the person they had lost. The neighborhood, however, could not forget. Conversations at community gatherings shifted from mundane rules to discussions about empathy, compassion, and limits of authority. HOA Karen, meanwhile, became infamous, a cautionary tale of obsession and overreach. And the story, captured on social media, spread far beyond the quiet streets, becoming a viral moment, a lesson, and a reminder of the fragile balance between rules and humanity. Even in absurdity, even in shock, there remained resilience. The community learned that some things, grief, dignity, compassion, cannot be interrupted, and the deceased legacy endured, shining brightly in the hearts of all who remembered, a testament to a life defined, not by fines or rules, but by kindness, love, and humanity. The moment HOA Karen finally stepped back, leaving the grieving family to reclaim their ceremony, the air still felt heavy with disbelief. What had been intended as a sacred farewell had been tainted by obsession and absurdity. The family gathered closer, wrapping arms around each other, trying to restore the sense of peace that had been shattered. Yet, even as they whispered condolences and shared memories, the shadow of that confrontation lingered. People spoke in hushed tones, shaking their heads, still unable to fathom that someone could disrupt a burial service over unpaid HOA fines. Within hours, videos from the event appeared online. One neighbor had discreetly filmed the entire confrontation, capturing every word, every reaction, and every stunned silence. The footage quickly spread across social media platforms, igniting a storm of outrage and incredulity. Comments poured in from across the country, and even internationally. People expressed disbelief, some laughing nervously at the absurdity, others furious at the lack of humanity shown. "This is insane," one post read. "Even HOA rules don't extend beyond the grave. Who does this?" Another added, "How can someone be so heartless and obsessed with power that they interrupt a funeral? Unbelievable." News outlets picked up the story, and within days, HOA Karen's name had become infamous. Interviews were conducted with neighbors, family members, and legal experts. The deceased family explained their side of the story, describing the grief and shock they had endured, while lawyers weighed in on the legal limits of HOA authority. Most agreed unanimously, HOA rules did not grant the power to interfere with funerals. While fines and obligations could be enforced during life, no HOA had the right to interrupt a sacred ceremony for financial disputes. The neighborhood, once a quiet example of order and civility, now found itself under a spotlight. Community meetings were filled with heated debates about authority, compassion, and the true purpose of rules. Some residents defended HOA Karen, arguing that rules are rules and obligations must be fulfilled, even after death. Most, however, condemned her actions, believing that empathy should always take precedence over paperwork. They questioned the judgment of anyone who would prioritize fines over human grief. Meanwhile, HOA Karen doubled down. She appeared in interviews, insisting she had done nothing wrong. "I am enforcing the rules fairly and consistently," she claimed. "This is about maintaining order in the community. Death does not nullify responsibilities." But the tone of public outrage only intensified. Memes flooded social media, comparing her to fictional villains, absurdly portraying her as a spectral enforcer of rules that should never have existed. Comment sections were filled with debates, jokes, and passionate arguments about morality, empathy, and the limits of authority. For the family. However, the online frenzy was a double-edged sword. While they appreciated the public support and validation, reliving the confrontation through shared footage was painful. Every time they watched a video, they felt the intrusion anew, the way grief had been violated by obsession. Friends and neighbors rallied around them, providing emotional support, sharing flowers, notes, and letters of comfort, reminding them that love and empathy far outweighed any one person's obsession with rules. Legal experts continued to weigh in, offering clarity on the situation. They explained that while HOA boards could pursue unpaid dues through standard legal processes, courts, or liens, they had no authority to intervene in a funeral service. Any attempt to do so could be considered harassment or emotional distress. Some speculated that HOA Karen's actions could even open her up to legal liability. A cautionary tale about letting obsession overshadow humanity. Across the neighborhood, a quiet transformation began. Community members started questioning not just HOA rules, but the culture of fear and control that had allowed someone like Karen to wield influence unchecked. New committees were formed to prevent future incidents, ensuring that empathy, respect, and human dignity would always take priority over bureaucracy. The incident, shocking as it was, became a catalyst for reflection, change, and a reaffirmation of shared values. Even months later, the story continued to resonate. Podcasts, news shows, and online forums revisited the event, analyzing the moral, ethical, and psychological aspects of the confrontation. Discussions emerged about human behavior, about power, about the dangers of obsession, and about the ways communities can protect each other from unnecessary cruelty. The deceased's life, though overshadowed momentarily by the absurd intrusion, it became a symbol of compassion, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. HOA Karen, despite her insistence on authority, faded into infamy rather than respect. She became a cautionary figure, a reminder of what can happen when obsession overtakes empathy, when rules are elevated above humanity, and when the line between authority and cruelty is crossed. The family, while scarred by the event, continued to honor their loved one's memory, finding solace in shared stories, laughter, and the enduring support of neighbors who had rallied around them. And so, the incident became more than just a viral moment. It became a lesson, a story to be told and retold about the importance of compassion, the limits of authority, and the unbreakable strength of community. In the end, the memory of the deceased endured, not because of the chaos of the day, but because of the love, empathy, and humanity that could not be stolen, even by the most determined enforcer of rules. Months passed since the fateful day at the cemetery, but the memory of the confrontation lingered in the neighborhood like an uninvited shadow. Life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm, yet something fundamental had shifted. The residents, who once prided themselves on perfect lawns and strict adherence to HOA rules, began to reconsider what true community meant. The incident with HOA Karen had sparked conversations that reached far beyond the single moment of absurdity. It had forced people to examine the balance between order and empathy, rules and humanity.